Money, consumption, status, and power have long driven our culture's pulse. They've shaped our motivations, our behaviors, and our beliefs. But what happens when we give art the same influence? Writers, designers, musicians, photographers, videographers, and the world's most creative minds have the power to heal us, challenge us, and guide us back home to ourselves. In their hands and through their crafts, we find a new world, one where art is a catalyst for powerful change, where self-expression, human connection, and deep empathy are the world's richest assets. This is Art is the New Wall Street, with your host, Morgan Short.
Hey artists, hey creative friends, welcome back to Art is the New Wall Street. Today's episode is a special one. We're welcoming our very first musician to the show, singer-songwriter Graham Bramblett. Graham is a singer-songwriter and storyteller whose music really hits the soul. With roots in Texas and a journey through Nashville and the Twin Cities, Graham has crafted a unique songwriting style that resonates with authenticity and with heart. So I'm really excited to talk with Graham today. We're going to explore the balance between personal challenges and artistic expression through music, and talk about how Graham's journey has shaped his music and his career in his life. So Graham, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Morgan. Nice to be here.
I'm so excited to dive in, Graham. So you spent some time in some very musically vibrant places like Texas and Nashville. Tell us about some of your life transitions, where music has taken you, pivotal moments in your career. Kind of give us the background a little bit here.
Yeah. So like you said, I was born and raised in Texas and grew up in a musical family, I would say. On my mom's side, everybody played piano. There was a piano in the house. My dad was a drummer, had a high school band when he was younger, was a radio disc jockey way back when. And so music was always in the house. And also, I think all kinds of styles, from everything from classical piano music. And I took piano lessons early on. And so learned some of those kind of basic, like the fundamental classical pieces to, all the way to Jerry Jeff Walker and George Strait and Willie Nelson, which are all kind of like these iconic Texas singer-songwriters, rock and roll. My dad introduced me to people like Roy Orbison and Chuck Berry. So a pretty wide swath of every kind of music as a kid, loving the music, and then having a piano at home, kind of wandering over to the keys and, mashing the keys with your hands as a kid does. And then for me, it was, well, if I hit this key and I hit the key over from it, that sounds really good. If I hit the key right next to it, there's dissonance there. I didn't call it dissonance, but then you move it over and all of a sudden you've got harmony there. And for me, that was a really pleasing thing. And so I kind of I was interested in that. And that was something that I think it was important for me as I learned to play instruments, is that I was really curious about like how these things worked and how do you get better at them? How do you explore on them? So it was more of a curiosity than like a chore like it might be for some folks.
Say more about curiosity versus chore. Like, what was driving that curiosity for you?
I was just fascinated by music and like by what the instrument did. When I was a student, as a piano student and a drum student, when I had to do your rudimentary things like doing your scales and that sort of things and sight reading, none of that, I could do those, but I would often want to go off on my own tangent, and I would want to like figure out some song on my own. And I'd be more interested in doing that than doing the fundamental work that the teacher was trying to teach me. Like a great example for drums, I was a drummer all through high school and played in a couple bands, and I would just turn on the radio and I would just play along to every song on the radio. And that's how I was learning how to play drums. And then I would pick out specific drummers that I liked, but that wasn't really what my teacher wanted me to do as far as like learning drums. Like I would do the rudiments and learn my paradiddles and double stroke rolls and all these sorts of things. But I also would just go off on these tangents and want to learn, everything that I could get my hands on.
But it was songwriting that really stole your heart?
Yeah. So I played piano first and that kind of ran its course. And then drums really sparked my imagination. I would play for hours just practicing playing along to other music when I was a kid. And then I got into a couple of bands, and within those bands, I sang in a couple of them, and we started writing our own material, and I volunteered myself to write the lyrics. I just thought that was interesting, kind of like the marriage of lyric and music. And so that's kind of where the songwriting thing started. Not great songs, but mostly they rhymed, and the lyrics rhymed and that sort of thing. And then when I got into college, I played drums for a little while. I was in a couple bands, but the summer of my freshman year, a roommate of mine had a guitar, kind of showed me where you put your fingers for chords, and I learned a couple basic things. And then once again, like my curiosity, I just started figuring out the guitar from there. And then I was really able to write more like full realized melodies and pair lyrics with those together, and kind of started that journey.
Were you studying music in school?
No, the joke is I think I had about 12 different majors in college.
That's the
Uh, I,
best.
I ended up with a degree in history. I went to Mizzou, and my first inkling was to be a journalism major. They've got a great journalism school, but yeah, I kind of bopped around, and then history ended up being my full on major, and that's what I have a degree in.
Okay. Okay.
So not really applicable at all, but college, but college is where I really started. I was playing, I was accompanying myself, I was getting really good or better at guitar, and learning how to sing and learning how to like put those two things together. And there was a place where they let me play on like Tuesday nights, and so I started to like play out live a little bit, and really started to like write my own songs. And my last year in college before I moved to Nashville, I went off and I recorded this little like 8-song project, and kind of played all the instruments, and that was a lot of fun. But that's when songwriting really kind of like took off for me, was in college.
And have you written some songs for other artists?
A few. So that was always the intention, was to get to Nashville, and
Sure.
I wanted to write songs and have other people have careers with them, and have them, have the artistic expression for them. And hopefully that would allow me to like have a nice lifestyle, and but not have to like get involved with all the things that you have to do to be a touring artist. When I moved to Nashville, I didn't really consider myself as more of a songwriter than a singer-songwriter, just because I was still working on my voice. A funny story, I went to have meetings with two PROs, which are performing rights organizations, ASCAP and BMI. And this kind of goes to the subjective nature of art and music. But I went into one meeting and I played some songs, and the representative there said, "I'm not real big on the songs, but there's something about your voice that I really like." I was like, "Well, that's interesting." And then like literally a week later, I went to the other one different, and they said, "I kind of like your songs, but your voice is really distracting me from like being able to enjoy the songs as they are." So it's this kind of funny thing of, I think that is kind of creative songwriters, artists, whatever, there's always this kind of like underlying insecurity about like, who am I? How good am I? Do people like what I do? And I think that's a perfect example of that is, it's completely subjective, and who knows, you know, what kind of day those people were having, any sort of distraction they had in their life that was causing them to see or experience that music that particular way. And it's kind of like, I don't know that either of them were very right or very wrong in their assessment. It was just kind of, that's the way that art goes sometimes. But it's a pretty funny example of like, these are professionals, and their job is to kind of like give that initial feedback, and you kind of have like a total opposite reaction on both ends.
Yeah, you have advice conflicting advice. And that's
Right.
an interesting part of art of any form, is like, what feedback do you tune into versus what do you kind of like believe? Who do you listen to? And,
Right.
like that feedback at the beginning of any journey can like drastically change the trajectory of our art career as well.
Right. I think that this is mostly true with most of the friends that I have is that, a lot of the time, the negative narrative can play much louder than a positive narrative can play, which is a real tricky thing because you have to ignore that and kind of find your own truth and kind of fall in love with your own art. Falling in love with your own art and the idea that I've kind of come to believe is that, create uh, for your own kind of desires and then let the audience find you as they may. And I
Yes,
think that's the healthy approach. But we all
absolutely.
know that, uh, that's easier said than done. But
Yeah, I have been detaching myself from the outcome of like my poetry when I'm writing or
yeah,
when I'm creating or producing a podcast or whatever, like just doing what I'm feeling on my heart and knowing that like the tribe or like the audience will like find me if I'm being authentic to myself, But it's easier said than done, especially for somebody who like I have been so focused on like achievement and accomplishment my
mhm.
whole life. And so actually detaching myself from the outcome is something I am working on a lot. But
It's a party trick. And the other thing I think is it can come and go in fits and spurts as you kind of like, as one good thing happens, then you kind of plateau and then you might have a dip and then you get this new surge of confidence about the next thing that you're doing. So I don't think I don't think the goal is ever to like expect that that's feeling kind of dissolves. I think it's just, that you kind of manage it and
yeah.
recognize it for what it is as time goes on.
So you hear those two conflicting
Mhm.
pieces of advice in Nashville. What did you do next? Like, what did you take to heart and where'd you go from there?
I went with the group that said I like your songs, but your voice you need to have somebody else sing your songs because it's distracting. Just because that's where my heart was really in writing the songs, and so I started down that road and kind of met some people in town that were brand new. That's kind of like the Nashville thing is that you kind of like collect other people that are trying to figure it out
Mhm.
and you all kind of start that journey together and you start to write songs together and different things happen and what happened for me is a good friend of mine got a record deal and he needed a guitar player and I was a pretty good guitar player at that time so I went on the road with him and got to we did a radio tour. We went and introduced the song and introduced them to the country at different, radio stations. And then we had a band and we kind of toured around the country and did all that, had a tour bus. So that was a lot of fun. It was a great experience, great way to see the country. And that was a great time.
Sounds like it. Any takeaways from being on the road?
I mean, somebody said along the way, don't forget to like, to notice it.
Mm,
Um, It was actually it was a guy that we had the fortune of meeting along the way who was a singer, and he was like, the one thing I wish that I had done was to take more pictures or just to stop and like take it in as you're moving along because as soon as it's gone and we had like a kind of a slow burnout where the single didn't take and everything kind of like everything kind of fell apart. Not I mean it just we lost momentum and like
mhm.
everybody had to go and regroup and and once you get to that point it's too late to kind of notice and take in and appreciate it as much as when you're in the moment so that was probably the biggest takeaway.
Noticing the moments in the journey. What advice do you have for like cluing into that?
I mean I guess the easy answer would be like meditate and that journal,
Mhm.
um those kind of fundamental things but uh I what I've gotten better at as time has gone by is, like with noticing, um, just if things seem to be going well, if I'm in a nice place and that, you know, the weather's nice, it's a good day, I'm in a good mood, everything seems to be
Mhm.
clicking. just to remind myself to take an extra beat to just kind of like be grounded in like, oh, isn't this nice?
Yeah,
Because it's important to do that.
absolutely. In any creative journey, really.
I think noticing is a huge engine of creation.
Ooh, yeah.
Um, if you think about it, like really what sparks the imagination, what sparks the idea of like, how do I, I want to write this song or I want to do it, whatever the medium is. To me, it's noticing. And I saw that you posted about that Rick Rubin book. So I thought I would share a book that I have.
Oh,
So this
yes.
is Darden Smith. I don't know if you can see that, but it's called The Habit of Noticing. And
Okay.
that was introduced to me from another songwriter friend. And I mean, just the title alone, I think is so important as a creator, as an artist, because that habit of noticing will fill the well of creativity. In my experience, you and I think that's again that's the engine of art. That's the engine of creativity is noticing things, and then like, well, what does this experience? What is it? What does it elicit? What is it bringing out in me? What idea does it spark in me? And do I need to act on it?
Wow. I'll have to read that book. Yeah, there really is something to the art of noticing. There really is. I mean, even like another book, The Artist's Way. Have you read The Artist's Way? I feel like you're somebody that maybe has.
I I got through like a third of it, and I was like,
Okay.
yeah, but
So,
I not that I it just wasn't for me. I have a lot of people. I know a lot of people that have done that book and have had great experiences with it. I just kind of like lost steam on it. But it's a lot of I think the same ideas.
okay,
There's a lot of books out there that kind of repeat the same, you know,
the
it's kind
same.
of the same idea worded differently with different experiences from the author. But it really all comes down to that thing. And I think the artist's way, if I remember, a lot of it is about journaling and like, what do you notice? And like,
Yep,
write,
exactly.
write
Yeah,
1,000 words,
that's why I was
you know?
that's exactly what I was gonna say is, Julia Cameron has, morning pages, which are like 3 pages of
Yeah,
journaling in the morning, and then there's, the artist date, which is once a week, you take your inner artist out to get inspiration in the world, and the only point of those dates is to solo venture to get inspired, like,
right.
pay attention and notice. Yeah, the art of noticing. That's very cool.
Yeah.
And I think it just speaks to the creative process in general and just being a human. I think just the act of creativity is just human, like even coming down to like the decisions we make in the morning.
Well, and the other thing that I haven't read the book, but I've seen some snippets and heard some things on podcasts where he's talked, and the idea that I mentioned before about like create for its own sake, not for some end goal, and let the
Mhm.
audience find you, whatever that audience might be. And I've heard people say that in songwriter retreats too, because the whole thing of like the validation of
Mhm.
am I a good songwriter? Does my art matter? I mean, should be enough that the song that I write satisfies what my intention was. And if
Yeah.
it is something where I write a song and, the experience of having somebody come up after a show or, a friend and say, hey, I was listening to such and such song the other day. That was such a, I love that song. That should be enough.
Yeah.
At the end of the
Yeah.
day, that should be enough. All the other things would be nice, but
Mhm.
that's kind of that's a small target to hit. All the other things, the being on a chart or being on a record, recorded, having a song played at a concert, all those sorts of things.
Let's talk a little bit about how you balance your music and your songwriting with like your 9 to 5 and your professional career.
It's tricky and it goes in waves. It goes in waves where I'm doing a lot of both
Mhm.
and things feel balanced and I feel like I'm, taking care of both sides. And then there's periods where work can, take consume a little bit more of the pie. It seems to have worked out the way it should up to this point. Um, the nice thing that I found for me is that I've been doing this long enough that people will ask me, how's the music going? Which is great because it always is a reminder of like, oh yeah, that's this big part of my life that, as much as work can be a big part of my life and consume like, uh, my bandwidth. When people say that, it's like, oh yeah, I do that too. And, it's a gentle nudge towards like, oh, am I writing right now? Or what's the next thing that I might be coming out with? Or, what do I want to kind of
And
point myself towards?
do you have a creative job, or what do you do?
I work in supply chain for a retailer called Tractor Supply
Oh, yep.
Company. But I'll tell you a funny thing. As it would have it, they did a program this year where they wanted to pair country music artists with emerging talent out in the US. And they did this talent surge. I think they had a few thousand entries that came in, but they also did one for internal, just for Tractor Supply Company employees. And so I wrote this song and I won. I
Oh,
won
you're
the
kidding.
contest. Yeah.
Oh,
And
yes.
so I was able to go and record that song at Blackbird Studio, which is this really great facility here in Nashville, like world class. Just a great experience. And I got to go out and play at Pilgrimage Festival, which is just south of town. And it was a really great experience. So it's that funny thing is that you never really know when work and music, when those two things will converge and an opportunity comes out of that. So, and that was a year where that happened last year. That was a year where I feel like I didn't pay as much attention to music as I have in years past. But then that was a really big deal. So you just never can tell.
Now, when you were out in Nashville the first time, were you also working a 9 to 5 as well, or were you doing music full time at that point?
Well, it kind of depended. Like I said, when I was on the road, that was music full time. But
With
other than that, that was probably like a 2-year period where I was kind of a fully employed musician. Everything, all the other times, I was mostly doing something else. I bartended. I did some like construction, just kind of, I'd had a couple temp jobs. So I was definitely had other things that I had to do to kind of pay the bills.
Yeah. So you're in Nashville again now, but
Yes.
there was a time, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a time you went to Nashville for the first time and then you came back to the Twin Cities, Minnesota,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Right.
So, and that was because of like, did you get burned out, or can you tell the story a little bit there of the transition that happened there?
Yeah. I was here. I was in Nashville from 2000, 2010. And in 2010, I was burning out kind of in all aspects. I was quite frankly drinking a lot. And the reason I went to Minnesota was to do some cleanup in my life. I went up to Minnesota. I got sober, and that was in April 2010, and spent my next 8 years in the Twin Cities. And the funny thing is that when I went up there, I had really that last year I hadn't really been playing or writing or doing anything at all with music. Um,
Mhm.
and so when I got sober, I, I like brought a guitar because I brought a guitar, but I wasn't even thinking about it, about playing or, I would just kind of noodle on it just for its own sake. But I just felt like that part like took a pause for a while as I kind of like reconfigured my life and figured out what it was that I wanted to do and, all that kind of stuff. And, probably 6 months or so into being in, moving up to St. Paul, kind of starting life over. A friend invited me to go because he was a songwriter to go to a songwriter showcase. The same one, by the way, that we were talking about that was at the Astor Cafe. Uh,
Oh, yeah. Cool.
yeah, a guy named Nick Hensley has been running this songwriter showcase for years up there. And the one that he had was Sunday night at Plums in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I went up there and I played a couple songs, and a couple of people were like, "Oh, that was good. Welcome." And all of a sudden it kind of dawned on me one day that, or the fact that I wrote songs and I enjoyed doing it. I kind of was like, it's kind of silly that I wouldn't do this.
Mm.
And the realization of like, not to do it for some end result, like some, definite end result, but just to do it because like I should, because I can. And, a lot of people would, you talk to people about songwriting and they're like, oh, I wish I could, play the guitar or play the piano or write a song that seems like fun or cool.
Yeah.
And I was like, and here I am, I have that ability. Like, why wouldn't I do it? And so that kind of like sparked like, well, I should, if I can do this, then I should do it, and so I started, showing up at those showcases and playing gigs and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, love that. Thank you for sharing the story of your sobriety.
Yeah, it's coming up on 14 years
Wow.
this April.
That's amazing. So do you notice like a difference in your creative process while you were drinking in Nashville versus now?
I think that before, I think my insecurity and my desire to like have everybody to try and create what people wanted drove it when I was drinking, when I was in Nashville. And the other thing to remember with the Nashville thing is that I was trying to write, in theory, I was trying to write commercial songs that other people would want to record. But
Right.
the trick with that is that, if I listen to what's on the radio and I try to copy that and try to emulate that, the problem with that is that somebody's like, whoever I'm trying to copy is already doing that and obviously doing it very well because they're right. Because somebody's recognized that. So I don't probably need to do that. I don't need to copy and emulate that.
Mhm.
And I think that's what I was doing, which kind of made, you know, maybe not all the time, but enough to where I don't know that I was writing songs that were really reflective of maybe who I was and,
Sure.
and so I think, in sobriety and just kind of being removed from that, you just end up writing things that are more, more present and more meaningful, to, or I was writing things that were more meaningful to myself rather than trying to like, do some, fulfill some abstract kind of idea of what I think people wanted to hear. So I think that was the difference between then and now, just being a little bit more secure in what it is that I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were in Nashville till 2010. You come back to St. Paul, Twin Cities. You're starting to get back into the singer-songwriter after the burnout.
Yeah.
You go to Astor Cafe. You're performing at other venues in the Twin Cities, right? And then when did you decide to move back out to Nashville? And was it for music or when did you get the Tractor Supply job? Tell me more about what happened next.
Well, I had a boss of mine in St. Paul, like my music. He came to my shows, and he took a job down here in Nashville, and
Okay.
and so one day I got a text message from him, and we had kind of kept up after he'd moved down to Nashville because I'd come and visit, and so we met up a couple times to like have a coffee or whatever. And one day he emailed or texted me and he's like, "Hey, do you know anybody that'd be interested in a job down here in Nashville?" And I was kind of looking for a way to get back there, just because I had some good friends that I've known for a long time down here, and it just made sense to get back, especially for the kind of songs that I write. It made a lot of sense to be here, and so it kind of fell in my lap, this opportunity to come down here to have, a job to support so I wouldn't have to struggle really financially, but also that it gets me back to where I was. So it was a really it was a really kind of sweet thing how it all, turned out that way.
It was synchronicity.
That's
That's really,
right. Yeah.
and
Serendipity. Is that
yeah, serendipity, synchronicity. Yeah, I
something
think
like that?
probably more serendipitous than
Uh,
synchronous. That's so
but it
cool.
was
So you
great.
moved out. How long have you been in Nashville this time around?
Been here 5 years now. Little over.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're performing out in Nashville as well? Are you doing music in Nashville right now, or what?
I've been
Where?
doing a little bit. That's kind of one of the things I'm trying to get a little bit back into is playing locally live. But I do. Last couple of years, I've been going out to Montana. There's an organization that hosts a couple songwriter festivals out there, and so I go out there and played a couple other songwriter festivals around the country. So that's really a lot of fun to do, to go somewhere and meet other writers and play some songs. And go somewhere you haven't been before. So that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, songwriter festival sounds super cool. What's
Yeah,
like?
they're great. Yeah.
Do you like collaborate with of the other songwriters, and like what's it like?
Sometimes the last one we were in Cody, Wyoming in August, September, and there like 6 of us ended up writing this song the last night of the festival. We were just kind of gathered around a coffee table and we had a really fun time writing this song. So yeah, that definitely does come up. And then it just opens up doors for other opportunities. Everybody lives in different parts of the country, so you never know where you might find somebody and they can help you, maybe play a gig somewhere that you've never been before. So it's a really kind of a fun thing to experience and be a part of.
Yeah, there's certainly power when creatives get together to collaborate.
Sure.
Some cool stuff can happen. So let's talk a little bit more about just like your approach to songwriting,
Mhm.
and your creative process to round this out. So I guess right now, how do you approach songwriting, and how do you ensure that whatever you're writing is staying true to you?
I'm not sure about that one. I mean, I think it's just kind of like, I think the difference is like, what I might write, where it might be more of an exercise, where I'm, practicing, going through, like finding, uh, practicing like how I'm approaching melody, how I'm shaping a lyric, how I'm, playing with rhythm or with like phrasing around, like the melody and the words. But there are songs that I might not ever record or really like release out in the public. And then there's the songs that, I write and that somehow resonate, especially, with me, where I'm like, well, I want to share this with whoever it is, whether it's like I'm going to release a single and, put it on the streaming platforms, or try to take it to a songwriter, like a music business friend and say, hey, I think might be a great song for somebody. So yeah, I think it's case by case basis.
Do the lyrics typically come first, or does the melody come first?
It can be either or for me,
Yeah.
So I have a new song that's going to be coming out maybe in the next month or so.
Okay.
I was sitting there in a big rainstorm and I stopped at this red light and the rain was just really pouring down and my windshield wipers were going back and forth. And like the noticing thing, I just took my phone out for a voice memo and I just recorded it because I thought it was just really made a really cool sound with the rain coming down and the wipers going. And I
Yeah.
recorded like 12 seconds of it, right? And so maybe a month later, my cousin Jack, who's a young music producer in New York, was in town for Americana Fest, and we went and had dinner. And he's doing some really cool stuff, working with a bunch of artists, and like really like on this cool trajectory. And I was like, hey, I would love it if you could take this snippet and like make it a loop that I could kind of play with and maybe write something to it. He's like, sure, no problem. So he made a loop, and then so I got it and I just played it on my computer. I just started noodling on a guitar, right?
Mhm.
And kind of came up with this progression that I thought really played well with that, the windshield wiper. And And so I got that kind of like the basic framework of the song. And then I started noodling with like a melody, like what melody fits the mood of the music with the rain and everything. And about that time, I went back to Jack and I said, "Hey, I'd love to come up to New York and like record this with you at your." He's got a little apartment studio, and so he's like, "That sounds great." So I flew up there, and the lyric was the last thing that came. In fact, I was on the plane flying up there trying to like hash out the last bit of the second verse, like what sounds good. And, I finally got it done before we touched down. Then I got into the car and, you know, made it over to Manhattan and we recorded it that afternoon. And so that progression, like that's one way from A to B that you get, a recorded song. And then he went further and added, some really cool instrumentation. He got some really great cello parts put on there. His girlfriend was really sweet and put some cello to like kind of expand the mood on it. And so it just turned into this whole thing. And so, that's one way that a song can go from start to finish.
You're kidding me. So it started with windshield wipers.
Yeah. But that's the noticing thing, right?
Yeah.
Because I was sitting there and I didn't have the radio on. I was just kind of, and I was sitting there and I was like, wow, sound is just like compelling and it's rhythmic, right? Because it has its own meter to it. And I was like, I should just record a snippet of that. I don't know what I'll do with it. That would be a neat thing to kind of see what that sparks.
Like this is a whole different world of music, but one of my favorite EDM bands, Odessa, at the beginning of their introduction of their album, they say that there was this astronaut and he was stuck out in space and there was this ticking sound and it would not stop. Like, what are you going to do? Like the ticking sound is just there and it's not going to stop. So they fall in love with the sound. Yeah. The art of noticing. Like, that's really cool. That's such a cool story. And so the song comes out in the next month, you said?
I think
or is it already?
I haven't said anything, in stone, but
Okay.
Sometime in the next month or two, it should be coming out.
Cool. Well, you will have to send it to me. And speaking of, before we wrap up here, Graham, where can listeners find your music and follow your journey?
So, social media, just Graham Bramblett on Facebook, on Instagram, not hard to find. And then I've got 2 albums, an EP, and a few singles that are out on all the major streaming services, Apple Music, Spotify, Pandora, et cetera, et cetera. So go out there and see what you like.
Yes, will do. Really, one more question for you. Do you want to talk at all about the process of creating either one of, or you've got a few albums out. Under the Lights, Standard Harmony.
Yeah. Those are the first 2 that I made. Those were both Minnesota records that I made in, Under the Lights was the first one. I wasn't writing. And then I was like, well, I should be writing because I'm a songwriter and, that's something. And so I started writing and I was pretty diligent about it. And all of a sudden I had a group of about 12 songs that I felt really good about. And my friend Nick Salisbury, who's a bass player there, I approached him and I was like, I think I have enough to make a record. What do you think? And so we started just kind of toying with that idea. And we went to our friend Greg Schuette's studio and had a couple of guys come in and we recorded that record and put it out in 2016. And really enjoyed doing it. It was a really fun process, and the creation of it. I don't know. I each one of those songs, it. How do I feel about all of them? I still feel really good about them all. Some shine a little brighter than others. But some, like if I go and play a show, like if I go play a songwriter festival, there's definitely there's definitely two songs that are on that record that I will still play without a doubt, most times, and songs that, people still, come up to me, or, friends that listen to my music. They're like, these are two of my favorite songs that I've written. So, I feel real proud of the work, and it was just a treat to be able to do it, and, with the people that I did it with, and to be able to like make that happen.
That's so cool. I I wish I was musically talented. I'm trying to learn the ukulele. I
Yeah.
had I had picked it up a couple of years ago, and then it's been like taunting me on my desk, and so I picked it up recently, like 2 weeks ago, finally. I don't remember much from when I was practicing like every
Mhm.
day. So, but
Right.
anyway, I just so admire songwriters, singers, musicians. I admire the arts, really. I'm just such a
Yeah.
fan of people that are going after it and creating. So, Graham, I think the big themes are the art of noticing and staying true to yourself and detaching yourself from outcomes. Really.
Yeah. And when that doesn't work, just be patient and let it all come back around.
Hell yeah. Well, Graham, thank you for coming on the show and sharing your musical world with us. It's been a total pleasure. And to all of our listeners out there, huge thanks for tuning in and hanging out with Graham and I today. Keep creating, keep making magic. Your art is a gift to you and to the world. We want to hear it.
It was great chatting with you, Morgan. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Art is the New Wall Street. If you liked what you heard today, give our show a follow or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can find us on social media or at artistthenewwallstreet.com. Keep creating, and we'll see you next time.